Henry, tell us how you came into comedy and what this book is all about.
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, just listen, thank you all for coming on today. I really, really appreciate it. And I realised that last night was quite, as I think Brenda already said, quite a harrowing conversation last night. So I think we're going from one extreme to another extreme today. So, yeah, as Ed said, I've been a stand-up comedian part-time for about 8 years with a fascination of Jewish comedy. That was really down to my father when he was alive. As a kid, he would record all sorts of, especially Jewish comedy or any comedy, onto cassette. Yes, that's how old I am, onto cassette. And at night, I would listen to comedy. But I took this mantle to try and do some comedy. Unfortunately, my father, unfortunately, never saw me perform. So what I did was, in honor of him, I took our original name from the Ukraine, when we came over from, my great-grandparents came over from the Ukraine, Churniavsky, to use as my stage name. And I think it might be a little bit of a devil in me, and maybe remind the devilment of my dad, because I love to try and hear the MC try and introduce me, because invariably they get it wrong. Which adds to the fun as well. So, so I was doing a lot of research into Jewish comedians, and especially in America. And I was just writing bits, and all of a sudden I had all these pages and pages, and I thought, well, why don't I write a book with them to add my humor in, some old Jewish jokes, etc. And because my comedy, all my comedy, all the gigging that I do is for charity. I do it mainly for mental health awareness and raise funds. I work alongside a company called Young Minds, and I'm about to become an ambassador for the Jewish mental health charity, Jamie, you may have all heard of. So I'm going to be an ambassador for Liverpool very soon, hopefully. And yeah, that's basically just a little introduction to me. I'm from Liverpool, so I'm a Scouser. So not sure whether many of you know any Scousers, but yes, I'm Scouser and Jewish, which is quite unique to be a stand-up, to be honest. There aren't many.
So what have you admired about comedy? What are your comedy roots, would you say?
Oh, definitely the Jewish side. I mean, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old and you're getting tapes about Jackie Mason, Shelley Berman, compilation albums put onto cassette, just resonated with me from such an early age. And my dad and I used to watch lots and lots of different stand-up comedies. I would go to his house. My dad was very much a good old-fashioned whiskey drinker. So we would sit, have a whiskey, have a laugh. I used to take him to some gigs as well. So comedy's always been there. And it's funny that I never, ever thought for one moment that stand-up was for me. It used to look like it was for other people, to be honest. But I did a course in Liverpool. Someone introduced me out of the blue about doing a comedy course, and that was 8 years ago. The Jewish comedy definitely has, well, it's basically my whole set, not my whole set, a lot of my sets, especially my solo shows, are based around being Jewish. And my mother gets, and my wife, and my children get a lot of stick.
Well, that's part of the course, isn't it? As long as it's not all completely true, I guess. You embellish reality.
I think you'd have to ask them, to be honest, but yes.
So who are your comedy heroes? I mean, you've mentioned a couple, but I mean, in terms of where do you think like the deep roots of Jewish comedy are? Because American comedy, would you say? I tend to think that it's very much Jewish comedy as American comedy, because the Borscht Belt really took over. You got something, leading up to Seinfeld, over the last 20 odd years, it's having a resurgence there. Jerry Seinfeld, is still doing stand-up after so many years. I mean, I think he was in his like late 20s or early 30s when Seinfeld, the TV program, was originally on. So American comedy is Jewish comedy. Would you say that?
I would say back in the day with the Borscht Belt, it was mainly Jewish comedians. But when I started doing the research, I mean, now it's very, very broad, but Jewish comedy is still very much highlighted up there. And I think, do you know what the funny thing is, who inspired me, who are my heroes? It probably has to start with the Marx Brothers. Because my dad was, as I say, was a massive fan of all things comedy. And when I was little, I'm going back maybe when I was about 10 or 11, my father used to wake me up on a Shabbat night where I'd be put to bed, and about 10, 11 o'clock, my dad would come and wake me up to come and watch black and white Marx Brothers film. And it was an amazing treat for me. Once a week, he would cut up some challah, put some butter and jam on it. He would then make you some Turkish coffee, which if you don't know what Turkish coffee is like, it is very, very strong, very thick, very sweet. I'd watch a film for an hour and a half and then be told, right, go to sleep after the jam and coffee. And that was definitely the start of it for me. So it is mainly a lot of the Jewish people. But I think what not changed my mind was doing this book and looking into it. And you're right, Ed, there's not a lot of typical Jewish UK stand-up comedians. There weren't any, there was that many. And when I started delving more and more into American history and the Borscht Belt and reading about it, I found so many more different comedians. And I mean, what a godsend YouTube is. It is just unbelievable because you can still get clips of some of the old Dan Rickles, Joey Bishop, Jack Carter, Lenny Bruce, all sorts of people. And it's just opened my mind to even more humor. So, yeah.
So what would be your, I mean, do you have a favorite sketch, either of somebody else's or your own?
Oh, favorite sketches of my own. I don't know, I can see what my favorite sketch is. I just like performing. I just the buzz for me doing stand-up, and a lot of people say, how can you get up there and try and make people laugh? Aren't you frightened? No, not really. You do get nerves going up, but I can tell you, one of the best feelings in the world is when you're telling a story or a joke and you get that automatic feedback from an audience. It's just incredible. It's just incredible. And I think what I've also found is that sometimes when I'm doing Jewish stuff to a non-Jewish audience, which most of them are non-Jewish, people come up to me afterwards and say, talk about it. You know, they didn't know I was Jewish and all this, and they do ask more questions. So I think hopefully I'm trying to enlighten more people about Jewish humor, maybe. And I know quite a few people who I've spoken to have said, when I mentioned about the book, they go, oh, I'm going to get that because I like to know a bit more about Jewish humor. In fact, the title, with all due respect, I would love to say was my idea, but it wasn't. It was a comedian friend of mine who isn't Jewish who came up with the title for me.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a bit about the book. What can we expect? So
what you can expect from the book is, and I know you're going to ask me to do a bit of reading, but I'm going to, when I come to that, I want people to unmute because I'm going to ask a question of what you would like to hear about it. But the book, it's funny, the book when I first started doing it was just about pure stand-up. And I spoke to an uncle of mine and he said, why don't you put a bit about where you came from? So the name Churniavsky. So I did, at the start of the book, talk about how the name Churniavsky came about. And it was mainly about my dad's side. Now, on my mother's side, my grandfather was called Lewis, but his original name was Shaposnikov.
Okay.
And I had a thought, you know what, maybe I should do both names, but as they're already struggling with Churniavsky, I think Shaposnikov as well would be too much of a struggle. And also I priced to put both names on the t-shirts, and that totally ruled it out. It was going to be far too expensive to do that. So the book looks at my story, then what comedy stand-up is, both in America and the UK. I then talk about the Borscht Belt, which Ed has already alluded to, which was an incredible time for Jewish humour. And there was so much information on it. I read quite a few books on that. And then we go into, before I go into the actual stand-ups, because the book is called From Groucho, that's not Karl, that's from Marx, it's Groucho, not Karl Marx. So before Groucho, there was Jewish humour. So there's a small section about what Jewish humour was just before then. And then I talk about 80 plus different comedians from Liverpool, from the UK and America. And at the end, I try and encourage anyone to take up stand-up. So there's a few tips and hints. So if any of you want to take up the mantle and tell a few jokes, get in touch with me on Facebook or whatever. I can help you. It'd be a pleasure, because everyone has a story. Everyone has a funny story. But so the book is primarily about the Jewish comics, a little bit of the history, some of their best one-liners or the jokes, intermingled with a couple of old Jewish jokes and a bit of my material.
Fantastic. Now then, you were talking earlier on about having a link with mental health charities. And I know that we share a friend in common, and that's one of the reasons. I perhaps don't want to get too much into that, but more on the general theme of why you're supporting mental health charities. Okay.
It was most of my comedy over the years. I've raised money for Alzheimer's because my dad had Alzheimer's. I did charity gigs for the Manchester bombing victims, etc. And a couple of years ago now, my best friend's son, a Jewish boy from Manchester, Oliver Bredsky is his name, people might know of him. He unfortunately took his own life. And that had a real effect on me, because I knew the boy. I went to his bar mitzvah, knew him growing up. His father was my best friend. And I didn't know how to help. Unfortunately, it was very tragic, where he didn't succeed at the time, but he never recovered, coming out of hospital, and about 12 months later, unfortunately, passed away. So it was a very, very stressful time for the parents, very stressful time for everybody involved. And I decided there and then that how can I help? And I thought, well, the only way I can do it is by raising awareness, trying to help people and raise funds. So part of my website, which is cuecomedy.co.uk, is aligned to a charity that I set up called Laugh for Life Comedy, which I do podcasts on, which talks about comedy and mental health. And there's helplines on the website. And Oliver had an affinity to a company, a charity called Young Minds. So I contacted them and said, would they like any help? And they were very helpful. And someone you all know, Johnny Benjamin, sure you've had him on with yours. He was another person who suffered from mental health issues. Approached me and told me about Jamie. And I contacted them. And as I said before, we've been talking, and I'm going to be their ambassador. So mental health to me has proven quite starkly for me in the last few years. And in fact, in my day job, be no surprise to any of you here watching me from Liverpool, knowing that my day job is I sell drugs. But they are legitimate. So I work for a pharmaceutical company. And they have been very, very good to me. They set me up with my podcast equipment, which you can see behind me, and very encouraging. So that is why I'm able, because of my day job, that I can put all my efforts outside that to raise funds and awareness for mental health.
Well, I think, mental health, and particularly at the moment, I think on our minds is the mental health of young adults and young men who really don't talk about their problems, and it can result in tragedy sometimes. And so I think anything to support that is very commendable. But maybe you want to open it up to some questions from the audience.
Yeah, anyone got any questions? Anyone got any favourite comedians that they like to maybe hear about?
Let's put everybody on gallery view. So if you just want to put, as in the traditional form, just put your hand up or put your virtual hand up. Morris, welcome from Israel.
Yep. Did you ever listen to Gilbert and Sullivan go kosher?
No, I didn't. I haven't. No, that's very interesting. Gilbert and Sullivan, say that again.
Gilbert and Sullivan go kosher. It was on records years ago, so it gives you a rough idea. You're on cassettes, it's on records.
Were they 78s or drums?
No, I'm always open to listen to anything to comedy, because I love to get ideas and just able to laugh at something. So I will look that up, actually.
Okay.
Jane, welcome.
Hiya. I just wanted to know, have you heard about 613? They're an American a cappella group. When I go around schools to talk to young children about Judaism, they do parodies of current music, but linked to all the festivals.
I have heard of a group doing it, and it may well be 613. I know the name.
Yeah, there's the Maccabeats, and there's also this one. Yeah.
Ah, right. Yes, the Maccabeats, as I heard of.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is great stuff for me. I'm getting more information to listen to, which is brilliant.
You'll enjoy it, honestly. But it's as in commandments, so 613, but it's SIX and number 13.
Oh, there you go. Well, I will do that as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane.
Right. Anybody else? Oh, yes. Is that Stephen? Welcome, Stephen. Do you want to unmute? No, it didn't. You didn't click. Try again.
Mute.
That's it.
Is that
Hello,
it?
Stephen.
Good morning, Henry. We have a connection, first of all. Are you there, Henry?
I am. I'm here. I'm here.
I am the uncle of Anthony Pollock, who seems to know you very well.
I know Anthony very, very well. Yes, he's one of my best friends, actually. Yes, we were not long ago out in Malta visiting him.
Anyway, I've been an exile Liverpudlian for over 40 years. I'm now in my later years looking to return to the Northwest, but I'm just trying to give you an example of the humor that I experience and talk about it, because my wife and I are thinking of returning to the coast, to Lytham St Anne's. You know Lytham? Now,
I do, yeah.
Confuse that. They say it's near Blackpool. Well, Ken Dodd had a joke which he used to tell and say, well, Lytham St Anne's is the posh part. That's where the seagulls fly upside down. You remember? Now, I mentioned Ken Dodd because you must have been influenced by his humor. He was, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest of a number of great comedians, of which there were many. The Liverpool humor combined with the Jewish humor is something special, I think. Yes? Yeah?
Absolutely.
So there we are.
Well, funny you mentioned Ken Dodd. I have actually seen him in concert. For those of you who might not know Ken Dodd that well, I'm sure you've heard the name. His shows are infamous. They go on for hours.
They never end, do they? They
never end. They go on for 3-4 hours. And I saw him just before he died. Well, a couple of years before he died. And I thought he won't be on that long, and he was. It was unbelievable. And actually, there was a connection between me and Ken Dodd, because apparently my grandfather used to make his suits.
Yeah.
And my father looked after Ken Dodd's sister's teeth, not Ken Dodd's teeth, his sister's teeth. And I did try and get him once to try and get involved in a charity gig that I was doing, but unfortunately he was away, and then unfortunately other matters happened. So yeah, but no, lovely to see you, Stephen, and we welcome you back to the Northwest anytime, even posh Blackpool.
Yes, of course. Nice to see you and hear.
Nice to see you.
Well, I have to say that many people are actually moving to St Anne's, Lytham St Anne's on Sea, and that was part of the research that we were doing in our last heritage project, and a very interesting history to St Anne's on Sea. So quite a lively, if a retirement community, but if you do make it, Stephen, I think you'll enjoy life there. So just welcome to Lynn Marie, who joined us, another Scouser, I have to say, one of our non-Jewish Scousers on the call. And so, Henry, what else can you tell us about, being, where do you go with your humor? Where are the gigs that you play?
What are
your favorite gigs?
Okay, well, okay. So where do I go for gigging? When you first start in stand-up, you go anywhere. The opening of an envelope, anything, just to try and get some stage time. So after I did the course, I gave it 6 months, and I started again. And I performed all over the UK. I've actually performed in America, in Florida, in New York. I've done gigs in Amsterdam. London. In fact, I actually got through to the semi-finals of the 2019 not so new Comedian of the Year Award finals, which was brilliant. I have to say, I did 2 fantastic shows there in the Museum of Comedy. That was quite a highlight for me. But I also do some of the festivals. I've done Brighton Fringe. I'm doing Edinburgh Fringe again this year. I'm doing Buxton Fringe. Buxton, I'm actually doing 2 shows. One's a compilation for Laugh for Life comedy for the mental health, and I'm doing my show With All Due Respect. So I do love performing in Edinburgh. It's I think it's one of the key places for it, and it's I've done some amazing shows there. My first show I did there was called 2 Religions, 1 Comedy Show, which was with a friend of mine who was a Sikh. In fact, I didn't know, he's a friend of mine now. At the time, I didn't know him. And we did the show together, and that went down really well. So I gig anywhere. In fact, I did a gig on Sunday, in a local gig in Liverpool, but I do travel. But as you can imagine, being Jewish, and having to drive and schlep everywhere, it's a bit of a pain at times. So, like every good Jew, make it easy for yourself. So I set up my own comedy show in Liverpool for a number of years. And I thought, well, this is round the corner. I can perform. I don't have to schlep. And I can invite other comics. And there were some magical nights as well. I mean, there've been so many good nights. Unfortunately, what you do remember are the nights where you don't do that well. I think that's part of the problem as a comedian. You might have a lot of good nights, and when you have one bad night, that stays with you. But sometimes, look, it happens. It happens to the best of people. I've seen some of the best ones have poor nights as well. So, but the buzz is, as I said before, it's just fantastic to do. So, yeah.
Have we got any more questions from our audience today? Have you shared the stage with anybody? You said that your Sikh friend. Have you shared the stage with any other Jewish comedians?
No, but I hope to. Funny enough, I hope to share the stage in Edinburgh. There's a show called Diorama. There's some friends of mine who are Jewish from London who are doing the show. I've done a lot of talking with a lot of Jewish comedians. Some Jewish comedians in London have been to see me at the Camden Fringe. The biggest star that I've actually performed with is do you remember a guy called, it's not Jewish, Tony Slattery, who was on Whose Line Is It Anyway? He had a lot of mental health. Well, he still has got a lot of mental issues. He was up in Liverpool quite a lot over the last few years, and he actually emceed one of my solo gigs in Liverpool. And what was so magical was, I mean, with Tony, you don't know what you're going to get on the day because of how he is. Always funny. And I asked him with the MC, he said he'd be delighted. He came along, and it took him about 15 minutes to introduce me, because that's Tony. He just takes over the stage. I did my show, and at the end of it, someone shouted out, "Is there any more?" I'd already done an hour. And Tony came up, and we did an impromptu set with Tony, which was absolutely fantastic, because nothing was pre-done, didn't even know it was going to happen. So with Tony, yeah, it was a really, really good help, and very encouraging as well. Very encouraging as well.
What's the most unusual place you've done a gig? You said you've sort of like been abroad in the States and in Miami. Well, actually, let me change the question.
Yeah.
How does Scouse humor go down in Miami?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because you have to change a lot of words in America, because some of the words don't travel. And one of the first gigs I did in Fort Lauderdale, the girl that ran it was a Jewish girl, and I did this joke. It's an old joke, which I will tell you. You know, I've got children. I've got twins actually, and one who's actually, I think, still watching. And don't worry, I'm not going to embarrass you today. But one of the things that you do as a father with a son is take them out for the first drink. It's like a mitzvah. It's what you should do with your son. And I remember taking my son for his first drink, and I bought him a pint of lager. He didn't like the taste, so I drank his pint as well. I then decided to get him a cider, but he might like something sweet. He didn't like that, so I drank that as well. I then got him a gin and tonic. He didn't like that, so I drank that as well. So he was like a whiskey, so I got him a whiskey. He didn't like that, so I drank that as well. And I have to say, I was far too drunk to push the pram home. Now, you all got that. When I did that, first of all, in the States, when I mentioned the word pram, tumbleweed, absolute tumbleweed. There was no reaction from the crowd, except a couple of friends of mine and my wife who was there. And a friend of mine shouted out, "Henry, it's not called the pram, it's called the pushchair." And as soon as he said pushchair, they all laughed. So you do have to change a lot of the wording. And I did, in a lot of the stuff I did was to change the language so they would understand.
Yeah. So yes, you got to mind your P's and Q's, as it were, in the US.
Not particularly. I mean, not P's and Q's. I just getting the right words. I mean, I think yes. I am not a blue comic. Hopefully, some of you might get my book, or you may have already got the book. There are a couple of swear words in it, but I'm not that blue. So I only use the swear words to emphasize a certain point. So I don't. If I go and see a blue comedian, I know what I'm going to get. I'm not particularly blue. I like stories. You know, most of my stories involve my 88-year-old mother, on how I was brought up. In fact, before we go to John, I'll just tell you, my mother actually was one of my first hecklers at a comedy gig. I don't get heckled very often, but my mum came to see a solo show in Liverpool at the Jewish school, which I actually lived next door to. I did a show, and I was talking about my mum. This is a true story. I don't know how many of you all had children, especially any of the ladies here. My mother liked to get us to bed early. And at 5 o'clock, she would go in the lounge, and this is ever so shame true, she would move the clock forward an hour to 6 o'clock. She would then bring the three of us in, me and my two sisters, and say, "Look, 6 o'clock, time for bed." And she would put us to bed at 5 o'clock. We never saw nighttime even in the winter. And then when she would put us to bed, a quarter of an hour later, she'd be back down, put the clock back, do what she had to, and she'd be in bed by 6. I mean, I never knew there was 6 o'clock news until I was 18. And as I was saying this with my mother in the audience, she shouted out, "Don't tell them this." So I now have to bypass every joke that I tell her. I mean, she's reading my book at the moment. She rings me up and said, "I've just read what you said about me. I've just read what you said about me." So, John, I think you got your hand up.
Yes, I'm a little bit into comedy. Edna Everage I've seen, and one or two other people. However, I have family in Melbourne, and they have the most fantastic comedy festival there, about 3 weeks a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the Brits go down very well there. And there's an awful lot of Jews in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Maybe you should try it. I mean, if you haven't got family, it's a bit expensive to stay there for a couple of weeks.
I feel like I've got family.
Could be worthwhile.
It would be. I do have family in Australia. I'm not sure where they are, but I do have family there. A lot of those you have to be invited to, and a lot of them is done, a lot of it's done by the Edinburgh Fringe as part of it. You have to get invited. But yeah, who knows? Once maybe I retire, I would love to go to Australia and try and do a bit of comedy. It's who knows? Maybe one day. You mentioned Dame Edna Everage. I went to see with my wife in concert, and I thought I was going to die. I thought I was laughing so hard. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
Yes, he's really good. He was Barry Humphries was in the original stage production of Oliver in London in the early 1960s, I guess.
Mm.
The only joke I really find with him funny is when he's standing in the middle of the road and a bus coming, and he quickly changed his underwear before he got knocked over by the bus. I don't know whether you've seen that.
So I think this is, let's toss it out to the audience. Who has got a favorite comedian? I mean, obviously, you know, once we've all seen Henry do his stand-up, he will be our favorite comedian. But in the meantime, before we get the chance to actually go out to the theatre and see a show, which fortunately we can do more and more of now, let's hear from you all in the room this morning. Who is your favorite comedian, or who is the one that, you know, stays in your mind? We've heard Ken Dodd. I never actually got to see Ken's live stage show, although my wife did, and I think she said she just saw him in the Southport Theatre, and the caretakers had gone home before he finished.
Yeah, I saw him at the Opera House in Manchester probably 15 years ago, and I think people were leaving, and he was just timing the buses for them. The people who had to go home on the bus, and I think it finished at about 11:45.
Well, the buses were just outside Royal Court. Brenda, you putting your hand up there?
Yes, I'm from Liverpool, Henry, but I'm now in Newcastle. Yes, I saw Ken Dodd so many times. They used to have to keep the car park open in Sunderland until after midnight. He used to close at 11, and there was always a note on it: "This car park will close today at 12 o'clock." We loved him. I absolutely loved Ken Dodd, but I did like Dave Allen. Something about Dave Allen I liked. I don't know what it was about him. He was, you know, with his Catholic humour, but Ken Dodd was definitely my favourite.
Dave Allen is the Irish Leonard Cohen.
Yeah, well, my late husband came to Liverpool University and nearly fell over when he saw the sign Knotty Ash. He didn't actually believe it existed. When he was coming down the East Slanks, he actually saw the sign Knotty Ash, and he thought, it can't be true. And I said, oh, definitely, but they do there's a Jam Butty mine, but I don't think he believed me in that. Yes, Ken Dodd was my favourite. Yes,
Dave Allen was a wonderful. Dave Allen was a wonderful, wonderful storyteller, and he was someone I used to watch avidly when he was on. In fact, I was watching, it was a documentary on not long ago. Fantastic story, fantastic stories. Absolutely. I think once or twice I did try and sit down and do a comedy act and try not to compare myself with Dave Allen. I just said we had a lot of things in common. Things like, you know, I had a whiskey, he had a whiskey. He was old. I have a Zimmer frame off stage, and he's got something cut off his finger, and I just said I've also had something cut off as well. So yeah.
Morris, you got your hand up.
Okay. Don't know whether you consider him a comedian or a magician, Tommy Cooper. Got to see him live, and I also saw Tommy Trinder live.
Yeah, sounds good.
Wow. Tommy Cooper, I loved. And in fact, I didn't put it in the book actually, because he's not Jewish either, but my grandfather had so many different jobs at times, hard to keep up. But he tells me a true story, that when Tommy Cooper was performing at the Royal Court Theatre, he was a taxi driver, and he went to pick him up and take him back to the hotel, which was the Adelphi at the time. It's only around the corner, but he picked him up. And Tommy Cooper leant over to my grandfather and said, you know, have a drink on me, and gave him a tea bag.
So I don't know what Deborah did have a hand up, but she's I don't know whether you want to still chip in there, Deborah.
Oh, sure. You know, I'm tuning in from Santa Fe, New Mexico, so it's quite early here. We started at 4 a.m.
Oh, well done.
I'm very honored.
But I decided to tune in. So I saw Rodney Dangerfield in the Miami Beach Convention Center a number of years ago. And again, you could piss in your pants listening to him. He's a little not politically correct these days, you know, whatever his jokes were. But we were naturally the audience was probably 110% Jewish. And we were with a group of 8. Two of the people, a couple, never cracked a laugh. The entire time they sat there stone-faced. The rest of us were like almost dying, like you were, that your experience. So different strokes for different folks. But,
well, let's see whether Henry goes down in New Mexico. That's what I say.
Pardon? I'm sorry.
Let's see if how well Henry goes down with his Scouse humor in New Mexico.
I liked your joke, but I would have said stroller, not push chair.
Yeah, that's it.
Do you know what? There's always someone that wants to change the words to some of my jokes, and I don't blame them. It's got to fit the audience.
Yeah, I understand what you mean about the language. I lived in England for a year, many years ago, and I thought, oh, this is easy. I didn't understand half of what people were saying to me.
Well, think of my problem, that I'm Scouse and I'm trying to talk English.
I don't know what Scouse is. What's
Scouse is a Liverpool dialect. I'm quite posh, but people in Liverpool talk like this. You see, you talk like fried chicken and kind of hoch, and exactly, as if you're really broad. But yeah, it's a strange dialect in Liverpool. But yeah, if you're offering me a room for the night, I'll come perform in your state. Don't worry. Funny enough, during lockdown was very difficult for comedians because they couldn't perform. A lot of them lost a lot of money, etc. And I did a couple of online performances, even live, etc., and recorded, and they work reasonably well, but you don't get the same feedback or the laughter, etc., on the screen. But I remember this because this happened about someone in America. I put a few jokes up on Facebook, on a couple of comedy forums, and I told this story that in lockdown, I know you can't tell by the size of me. If I stand up, you'll probably tell. I hope you like the t-shirt.
I say that all the time.
I'm quite big, and so basically, like a good Jewish boy, I like food, and I like to perform. So I noticed that there were a lot of firms who delivered food, Deliveroo, Just Eat, and all these companies. So I set up my own company where I would buy some food for myself, go to someone's house and perform on their doorstep in lockdown. So kill two birds with one stone. And I called it Deliver Gym. Now I put this on a forum on one of the Jewish forums, and I got told off because they said you're not allowed to advertise. It don't figure. But someone on that same forum messaged me and said, "Can you deliver to Santa Monica?" So yeah.
We have Bess, and then we have Lynn Marie.
Hi, I'm sorry I came in so late, but most
All right, Bess, no worries.
My favourite, first of all, before I tell you my favourite, I have to tell you that I am guilty of your mother's trick. And I was killing myself laughing. I only did it once. It was April Fool's Day. I wanted the kids up early, so I changed the clocks and we went out. They'd had their breakfast before we went out because I had to keep appearances up. And my son asked me in a very loud voice, "Mum, what time is it? I'm ready for my lunch." And this little old lady, sweet as could be, came up to us and said, "Oh dear," she said, "it's not lunchtime, little boy. It's only just breakfast time." And he said, "But I had my breakfast earlier." She said, "Yes, but it's only 10 o'clock now." And his face just hit the floor because he couldn't believe I'd pulled the con on him. So anyway, my favourite, I have two actually of the same ilk, is Norman Wisdom and Harry Worth.
I was in a film with Norman Wisdom.
Oh, I love it.
Oh,
Yeah, it was just the back of my head. That was the only bit that was in the film.
I loved him.
oh, Harry Worth. I haven't heard that name mentioned for so long. And funny enough, I do that trick. I used to do that trick to my kids in the mirror.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. Brendan.
I'm not sure whether my daughter remembers, but she's on at the moment.
yeah.
I used to do that in the mirror.
He did it in a storefront or something.
What do you say, Morris? Say again.
I think he did it at a storefront, you know, the corner.
That's right, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Just before I go to Lynn Marie, Victoria's put a link in the chat because she's asking, has anybody heard of Sid Kipper? And she's put a link to a Google search so that you can find out who Sid Kipper is. I personally don't remember Sid Kipper, but anyway, Lynn Marie, come on, you're joining us from the land of the Scouts as well in Liverpool.
You're on mute, Lynn.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Lynn.
I was brought up on people like Benny Hill, Tommy Cooper. I've seen Ken Dodd many, many times, and I was embarrassed by Ken Dodd because I dared to go to the toilet in the middle of one of his first sets, and we were in the front row, and I'd snuck out. Well, I don't know how, his timing must be perfect because the minute I opened the door to come in, the spotlight hit me and upstruck happiness. So I had to walk all the way down the stairs. Not just play to the audience. But I loved the man. I thought he was absolutely brilliant, you know. But another one I liked was Danny LaRue. My grandmother actually thought he was a woman. She didn't realise for some reason that he wasn't a woman. But so I thought all those comedians, yeah, a little bit blue maybe, but they weren't really offensive with it. They were funny with it, and I just really enjoyed them.
And then I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're still in Liverpool. You must come and see me sometime. I'm doing a show in Allerton Road on the 15th of May for Ukraine refugees. So
right.
If you follow me on Facebook under Henry Churnier, you'll find a bit more information on it. So we're doing a dinner and a comedy night.
I'm in Astor Road, so I'm not far from there.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, another one's on the list. All those comedians you mentioned are just wonderful. I'm going back to Ken Dodd. As I said, I'm a medical rep, and many years ago, he was asked in Notty Ash to open up a GP surgery.
Yeah.
And the doctor asked a few of the representatives to put their stands up selling their wares and also provide lunch. So we bought a load of sandwiches and cakes and all sorts. And he invited all his patients in to come and listen to Ken Dodd open it. And the idea was that Ken Dodd was just going to cut the ribbon, welcome everyone to the show. He took so long talking and performing that all the sandwiches had curdled by the time it was time to eat them.
Yeah, I met him at a couple of events, and he just, made you feel part of, almost as if you were part of a big extended family. He was really, really great to communicate with and to be around.
So I'm going to go back to Deborah and ask her.
Thank you.
Who is your favorite American Jewish comedian?
I really like Larry David. He
Very
doesn't do
dry,
much stand-up. He does do stand-up, very dry, but his, the thing aside from being hysterically funny, the thing I like the best about him is on his shows, it always closes the circle at the end. The punchline's the last little 30 seconds of the show. I like, he's also, Woody Allen is a little bit also not politically correct, but same drollness. He did a little show with his mother once, and she said, why couldn't you become a dentist or an accountant? She was still picking on him. I think his mother was funnier than him.
Larry David does make my book, actually. Of course, he is in there. And funny you bring up this comedian. That's his poster up there for my children for the new series, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah. Sometimes people think, "What the hell is that picture?" and they get a bit worried what it is. But it is Larry David. But I mentioned at the beginning that one of the highlights for me in life was watching the Marx Brothers with my dad on a Friday night. And my son and I, my twins are now 30, 34, I think. Matt will tell me if I got it wrong. But one of the highlights for me is that I used to get my son up to watch films with me. And in lockdown, what we used to do, we used to watch Curb. And I belong to a whiskey tasting club, and I get whiskey sent to little pouches to my son and myself. And we have a whiskey tasting night. And what we do is we put Curb on, we start at the same time, and we watch the show, looking at each other on the phone. And at the end of it, we're drinking our whiskey, and then we talk about the show afterwards. And to me, that's very, 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 very special.
Yeah.
So who hasn't talked about their favorite comedian? David, do you have a favorite comedian? I mean, it must be a comedian to do with food, because you know. Go on, Tal.
That's right. I'm afraid I don't have a favorite comedian as such, but my mum does like a lot of Jewish humor. She likes Billy Crystal.
Oh yes, famous Jewish actor / comedian. Yes.
But my mum has an interesting theory about this. She says that with a lot of Jewish comedians, it's almost like they don't mind sort of taking the mickey out of the like a lot of Jewish things, and I think it's how a lot of Jewish comedians can laugh at themselves, like and I think that's very interesting how, and I said to my mum like once, why do you think that is? And I think my mum's answer was because through the history of like the Jewish people, because there's been so much heartache and everything, my mum says they can put themselves down before anybody else does.
Yeah, we're a very deprecating race, you know. I'm often talking about things that affect me and stuff like that, you know, and because I'm old, you know, I talk about surgical procedures and all sorts of things on stage. And yeah, we're very good at that. Jews are very, very good at that.
And I'm going to turn to Natalie. Natalie, do you have a favourite comedian?
Hi everyone. So I'm a bit biased, to be honest. I think Henry Churniavsky is probably my favourite comedian, so I can't say anything else.
In case anyone hasn't registered.
I'm the daughter, by the way.
Yeah, she's my daughter, and now she's mentioned it, she is a source of a lot of my comedy as well. So as I've already embarrassed my son with the pram joke, my daughter many years ago rang me when I was on a train and I was having a coffee. I was coming back from London to Liverpool. I know I've got long left, but then my daughter rings me and she says, "Dad, what's your STD?" Now, first of all, I spat my coffee out, apologised to the woman in front of me, and I'm thinking, what? How? STD? First of all, how does she know? I said, "Dolly, what are you talking about?" So she went, "What time are you arriving?" I went, "No, that's ETA. STD is a sexually transmitted disease." So my daughter gets a lot of her words mixed up, don't you, darling? And one of the other things of the highlight of actually, this is another highlight of my life. My daughter got married, and before the wedding, months before the wedding, she told me about, she wasn't going to tell me much about her dress, because what she wanted was she wanted her to be at the top of the stairs, looking down at me at the bottom of the stairs, and I had tears in my eyes. And I said, "As long as someone tells me how much I paid for that dress, I will be crying, don't you worry." But she did allude to the fact that it might be, I can't think of the word now. I don't know if I've forgotten the word.
I'll tell you what the joke was. I mixed up my words, and instead of saying an ivory dress, I said an ovary colour.
Sorry,
Got
yeah.
my words a
Even
little
the
bit.
comedian forgets the line. So we've done this, yeah. So I must
came out as a bird cage.
Huh?
It came out as a bird cage.
Yeah, exactly.
I can tell you she was an absolutely stunning bride and a stunning person. So yes, I did cry for most of the day when I realised how much I'd spent. Because if you're Jewish, you know you can't do Jewish weddings on a shoestring, which is part of my show. With all due respect, I talk about Jewish weddings.
So Henry, I think we're coming sort of to coming up to the hour. You need to tell us about the book, where you can get it, and all that kind of stuff, where the money's going to.
Thank you. There you go. With all due respect, it's on Amazon. It's a work of labour. All profits are going to the mental health team. To mental health charities, both Young Minds and Jamie. So the money won't be going to waste. So please, if you want to have a laugh, smile, learn a bit more about Jewish comedians. I mean, I bet you didn't know that Freddie Starr was Jewish. His mother was Jewish. So there's quite a few surprises in there, some nice stories, some very nice old Jewish jokes, if you like old Jewish jokes. And please let me know if you think anything of mine is funny. I would love to hear from you. Please add me onto your Facebook. I've got a website called www.cuecomedy.co.uk, which has clips of mine, some have a couple of rude words in, so please bear that in mind. I don't want to upset anybody. It's not too blue, I promise. But yes, I would love you to get the book. It's on Kindle as well. And you'll be doing a mitzvah. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Henry. It's been great having you in the